We will start off the meeting with introductions. So we can start over there and who you are and where you represent.
Oh, yeah, so I'm Kelly Chichuk and a community and planner. I work for Metro Transit.
Average White, Metro Transit.
Damian Stern, the DOT District 2.
Morris Ritchie, EOT District 2.
Snuck in. Johnny Gregor, City of Bellevue. Your border.
Michael Blank Mappa.
Pittsburgh, Douglas County. Mike Clifford, City of Billion. Eric Williams, Patrick NRD. Derek Miller, City of Omaha. Matt Cox, City of Council Bluffs.
Mike Helgerson Mappa.
Brian Guy, City of Omaha.
Benny Wilson, Stark County.
John Marr, HDR.
Would the online folks like to start now with their introductions, please?
Travis on my ODOT.
Dan Carpenter, Benish.
Jeff Subject, City of Omaha.
Sherry Levers, Omaha Metro Transit.
Rich McFall, Nebraska VR, and chair of CTC. Good morning.
Dayton Schultz, Federal Highway, Iowa Division.
Hi, this is Eric Miller with FHU.
Yeah, Haschenberger, Mappa.
Joan Green, ENA.
Are there any other online folks that have not introduced yourselves? Hearing none, we will move toward the first action item of the day, and that is the approval of the August 16 minutes. There was a copy of those both sent out and provided when you walked in. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the August 16 minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is approved. There's a public comment period open for the Fourth Amendment to the 2050 long-term plan. Court is going to present this.
Yep.
We'll ask for
Yeah. So with Amendment 4, I've got 13 projects that I'm updating to align with cost increases. We've got 3 projects with scope changes. Okay. Adding 18 new projects, which have been identified roughly over the last year through various local planning efforts. And then I'm also adding the carbon reduction program, regional carbon reduction program funds to the federal funding forecast. And then I also added some additional earmark and aviation funds to the federal forecast as well, based on what we see. And all of those details are in the packet that went out with the calendar invitation. Okay, yeah. Any questions on, so what we're asking for today is a recommendation to the board to open a 30-day public comment period, and then in October, we'll bring this back along with any comments that we receive and request recommendation for approval of the. So today we're asking for a 25-day public comment period. We're looking to open next week at our board meeting.
Okay, we have a recommendation. Were there any questions, anything anybody had? Otherwise, we have a recommendation for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is supported. Okay. So we now have amendment 1 to 2025 tip that is also about work.
Yep, that's me. It's a little hard to see on the screen up here, but I'll give you the rundown. But what we're talking about in Amendment 1, so the 2025 tip will go live next month, start of the new federal fiscal year. I was gonna hold off on doing the First Amendment to 25 tip until October, because we'll gain some additional information about where our remaining balances are, in different regional federal aid programs in October. So I'll still be bringing that back, and that'll be part of Amendment 2. But for Amendment 1, we're updating some language in the tip about how what constitutes an amendment versus an administrative modification. If you will recall, we did that for the 24 tip earlier in the summer when NDOT released new guidance about that. That is, we're basically just adding the same language that we added to the 2024 tip. It changes the threshold for an amendment, primarily that instead of 2 million being the floor for a change, it's now 5 million. That's the biggest difference. And then also it kind of loosens up some of the language around scope. Adding 2 projects to the tip. Both of these were in previous tips, but they didn't make it through either last year or during FY24. City of Omaha and the City of Bellevue, both the City of Bellevue project is planning on Cornhusker Road, and the City of Omaha is signal operations on West Mint. We're asking for a recommendation to approve this amendment next week.
Make motion approved.
Second. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Now Carlos is going to present of intent for the grant under the Reconnecting Communities Pilot Program.
So Carlos is going to be, is absent today because he's at the safety workshop in Potawatomi County for their Safe Streets for All project. So I'll present on this. So MAPA applied for this project in this program last year through a different set aside of the Reconnecting Communities pilot program, which was called Neighborhood Neighborhood Access and Equity. And, we applied for planning funds to really kind of continue the conversation that's been ongoing between the City of Omaha and DOT and MAPA about really what opportunities exist for looking at the North Freeway as a barrier within North Omaha and really leveraging from the City of Omaha's perspective, the housing investments that are being made along 24th and 30th Street and addressing the barrier that the North Freeway represents. And really from our perspective, when we applied through the Thriving Communities Program for technical assistance on this program several years ago, it was really about the decision-making process and having NDOT at the table, working through what that looks like, how we take advantage of resources through the new infrastructure bill. And this is one of them. So the request that's going in is likely to be $2 million, which is the maximum request. As the court slide notes here, is a planning study, kind of along the planning and environmental linkages side of things. And really trying to get to a sense of what potential construction outcomes might be. Really kind of an early phase planning study. We're applying for FY26 funding. The current NOFO that's on the street is for the last, I believe, 2 or 3 years of the fiscal year, years of the infrastructure bill. And so it's a larger pool, and it's really the last shot at this program until there's new reauthorization and of this program. So with that, the timing has really rarely works for us to bring these kinds of letters for MAPA to apply through TTAC. And so this was a unique opportunity where we had that. We wanted to have the conversation here today. Happy to provide any frame or background or whatever on this project, but it's kind of a high level of what we've been working on for about 18 months now, and excited to apply. Derek, I know you've been involved. I don't know if you have any thoughts or feedback on it.
No, it's just been a real exciting program. It was something that Mike and I talked about. It's very similar to what was a program called like 10 years ago.
They've had
Sustainable Communities.
Yeah, sustainable communities, but they also had the freeways or highways to boulevards program as well, which is kind of part of it. But it's been interesting in the early outreach that we did. We were matched with WSP through this Thriving Communities program. It wasn't a grant. It was really kind of a technical assistance project where they gave us a consultant to facilitate a bunch of work through this effort. A lot of what we're hearing is around housing. A lot of what we're hearing is about economic inclusion in projects when investments are made, that the community has an opportunity to be a part of it, that they're really focused on that aspect of it. Genuinely, the input that we've been getting so far is less about the freeway itself than connecting across and doing some of the work there. And so I think from our perspective, that's an interesting conversation. It's a conversation that's happening in the community, and bringing partners like MAPA, like NDOT to the table is really an opportunity to look at how we can do more of this in the future and what resources. It's a similar program, but it's much larger. This is, I think, a $5 billion a year program overall. So very, very large, but very oversubscribed as well. So a lot of applications.
What are some of the options that have been looked at for this?
Very few to date. I mean, most of what we've been doing so far is just community engagement. This would be the first step towards what are those options. This is the actual planning and engineering piece. Engagement to date has really been around what should our goals be, and really what does that look like? What conversations are already existing in the community? So there have not been planning or engineering work done on this yet. That's really what this would allow.
So just so I'm clear, you've got no conceptual, but you want us to approve conceptual and go into preliminary engineering without really looking at if there's feasible concepts or anything.
Well, that's the purpose of the whole study, is to kind of basically look at, in terms of looking at where we are in the planning and environmental linkages, like the end of a PEL is really more likely a conceptual engineering drawing than anything else. Like we're gonna have a difficult time to get into preliminary engineering without entering the NEPA phase. It's really gonna come down to how we get through kind of the initial piece, get into some of that environmental linkages work, and try to see what could actually does make sense and what is gonna be among that list of feasible options to carry forward, if there are any.
Well, and I guess that's my thing is you want to include conceptual and preliminary engineering design without really doing an initial, what I would call just a study to see, one, what the options are, what's available and what the cost of those options are.
Yeah, we can look at that, because I think that's good feedback, because part of what we've done, I mean, the budget that we've laid out is pretty general, but we're saying among the things that are eligible, these are the things that we're looking at, but that's good feedback.
Mike, this is not a spin-off or tied to in any way the truck route and Highway 30 corridor, is it a, it's not, it's completely a separate.
Yep. There was some talk about doing, so when we started the coordination with NDOT on this thing ongoing since last year, but that came up about, the US 75 study that we did.
I said Highway 30, I meant 30.
Yeah. Yep. I knew what you were talking about. And so north of Stores Expressway, we did that study that was funded by the legislature to look at truck routes. And again, that's a place that's been evaluated, been studied a lot. We had a planning study that came up with options and alternatives, but I mean, it's very constrained. There's big trade-offs that we have to look at. And so in DOT, one of the recommendations that they had was, well, maybe we get resources through this project, look at the North Freeway, look at that route and do additional planning on that corridor. We thought it wouldn't really strengthen the application from what we did last year when we got the feedback on the application that we submitted last year. A lot of it was about the investment and the alignment with NDOT's priorities. And that's certainly been strengthened over the last year, but kind of putting that project and that planning process into this didn't really make sense. We talked about how we could involve some of the other MTIS projects that are going on in the region and use this as kind of a stair step of things that are already committed. Ultimately, we thought this has enough sort of independent utility, it makes sense as its own sort of project that we get the resources, we'll continue it, but otherwise we'll have to look at other options to continue the conversation. But yes, related but not the same.
Yes, I'll make a motion to recommend approval on the condition that it's just for a planning study and conceptuals to determine what's feasible and what those cost options are for what's feasible.
Second that. So we have a motion and a second for that. So let's vote on that. And if that's not popular, then we can have further discussion.
Sorry, additional question. I'm sorry, you said 2 million was the request, 2.5 is the total. Where's the rest of the funding?
So currently we're working on that piece. I mean, MAPA, we have tip fees that come into it. That's a big part of this. And DOT has committed funding to be an equal funding partner. Part of it's about whether there's additional commitments from other partners. And so we're going to show a budget showing that it's just non-federal match, showing the contributions from MAPA and DOT to date. But that's the big portion of it. I mean, it's a multi-year study. And so for us, it's kind of, being able to just spread this out over a number of years.
I guess, I have major concern if we're using tip fees to run project studies. Tip fees are supposed to be used for staff costs.
Yeah, well, they're non-federal so in the actual work that MAPPA does, the pool of non-federal funding that we have includes tip fees. That typically has gone to the staffing levels at MAPPA. But we also leverage a significant amount of soft match in our UPWB when we present that budget. If you look at that line item, we have a very, very significant amount of those tip fees are going to the regional studies that we're doing, like Safe Streets and Roads for All and other things, where we're able to actually leverage many of those other options to essentially get the most out of our federal funding. And so that's where a lot of that's been going. And that was part of the tip fee was when we do regional studies, the past practice had been to go around to each community and say, we're going to do a $100,000 study. Where are we going to get the 25,000 for? We put requests out to the communities and basically pass the hat on each thing that we were going to do. And the tip fee was presented as an alternative to that as well. And certainly it has allowed us to increase our staffing. It's allowed us to increase our grant writing and grant making. And that's been a big
When
part of
when the tip fee was proposed and voted on by the board, it was for staffing purposes. There was no studies or anything else part of that proposal.
I would disagree with that because part of what we had talked about was doing more regional data, regional studies. That was a big portion of what we talked about at the board when we presented the tip fee.
Can you remind us what the annual tip fee collection rate?
It depends on what it's obligated. So it's based on 1% of the obligations of our regional programs, SDBG, TAP, and CFP.
Is NDOT a project sponsor or is it now, I mean, is NDOT contributing any funding?
Yes, they have committed to being an equal financial partner. So that kind of makes the division kind of interesting, just depending on how many project partners we have. But that is their commitment to date. And that's different and more, I would say more direct than last year's financial commitment, which was part of what we worked to improve this year. So I'd say that's more of a stake, but this will be a MAPPA-led study with NDOT and the City of Omaha as partners.
And this is to apply. If the application is not accepted, then the work does not move forward. Is that?
I think work would continue, but it would not be this.
Lower scope because.
Yeah, we would not be able to tackle this kind of a study without significant federal resources like this. Yeah. And I don't know that there's another program that kind of has this type of focus that it would make sense, but there was some question about whether we would even apply again this year. And it wasn't until the NOPO that was released that basically said it's the last years of this program. It's not just an annual allocation, it's multiple years. That's why we're suggesting an application at this time.
So we have a first and second on motion to recommend for conceptual stuff. So
I have a clarification question. With the wording that you propose, like, does that in any way like reshape or hinder the application?
No. Okay. I don't think so, Court. I mean, you're more involved. I think that's a good clarification. We can talk about this conversation in the application.
Yeah, there's a limit to how far the actual study can go. Yeah, we're not talking about doing, we want to get an idea from an engineering perspective of what's possible. So there will need to be some conceptual design, but yeah, we're not like designing the facility and then taking that into NEPA. That's not the intention of the study.
Yeah, and that's good clarification too, because getting that language right, I think will just make the application of the narrative stronger. Yeah.
So unless there's further questions, we have a motion and second. Not seeing any further questions. So all those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye. Aye. Okay, those opposed, same sign. Okay. That's the end of our action items on today's agenda. Moving into the discussion items. This is the time for public comment. If there is anyone in the room or online from the public that would like the opportunity to speak, now is your time.
So was this something based to legislatures?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we were basically in a review of our practices. There was recommendation that on all of our public meetings like TTAC, like RPAC, like Board of Directors, Finance Committee, that we put a standing item on there for public comment. I mean, it was always implied, but we were recommended that we do this as a specific agenda.
Yeah, there are now too. I think we should all stand when Todd comes in. I think that would be appropriate.
Second.
I was thinking of everybody just getting quiet, so that way he thinks we're talking about.
I'm used to this. You can do both. Well, that was productive. Is there anything else? Okay, discussion item F is the TAP Committee Carbon Reduction Program discussion.
Yeah, I'll start it. Eric, I actually want to ask you.
Yep.
So I did contact NDOT Central. I contacted Jared Walker. He wasn't able to be here today. If we want, we can kick this to October. I don't know if we want to start the conversation without, and I don't actually know if either of you were engaged. Yeah, I kind of didn't think so. So I guess we can have a conversation with everybody else.
Did he feel like he was going to be able to, would Jared be here in October?
No, I believe he sent an actual message within the last couple of weeks that he would not be able to make the next two.
Oh,
I think he had
okay,
messaged that he'd possibly send Curtis Nozzle in his place to one of them, but I don't think that was today's.
No, it was too short notice to put something together for today.
Well, so I mean, if we don't expect someone to be, I mean, maybe we should just kind of talk through what was discussed at the committee.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I've got some notes on here. Okay. And I can just give you a little bit of background. So our regional carbon reduction program, we took a little while to select projects for it. In the very first year of funding, we'll be coming up against its lapse date over the next fiscal year. So if that first year isn't used by the end of federal fiscal year 2025, the funding will lapse. And for a lot of the programs like STBG and TAP, NDOT has been mostly able to kind of bear that burden. Like the region in the past, I mean, we don't typically lose any of our funding. NDOT is able to kind of shuffle projects around at the state level so that they spend down the older money while keeping our money fresh. They came to us with an issue where they don't think they're going to be able to do that the same way with the carbon reduction program because of some of its limitations. So what they proposed was giving us newer CMAQ money, very kind of a similar pot of funding. It's designed to do kind of the same stuff as a lot of the same stuff as CRP. There is some difference in eligibility, but the projects that we had targeted for CRP would be CMAQ eligible. And I know some of our partners are already aware. Brian kind of talked about swapping one of your newer projects for CMAQ, which makes sense because a lot of the signal projects are funded by CMAQ anyway. So it kind of just keeps them under the same program. When the funding would go to NDOT, they would still have to spend those CRP dollars in this region. They can't take them out of the region. And the question that was raised at TAPC is, well, what are they going to spend it on? And for the most part, the list that was sent to me was for basically digital message signs and replacement of high mast towers. And TAPC kind of, raised some question marks because it doesn't seem like it really fits with the carbon reduction program, the goals of reducing carbon emissions. They're technically eligible. NDOT at state level flex some of that funding to other programs. And I believe that's what the intention is without, somebody being able to tell me exactly what their plans are from the state. I don't necessarily speak for them. That's about the extent of my understanding of what their intentions are.
The use of those funds for the high mast lighting tower project had me just as confused.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is what the committee was discussing is that the CRP funding has intended outcomes, and it is called carbon reduction program funding. And so the idea is you must be reducing carbon emissions. That's the intention of the funding. But the committee also realized that in the review of the application process that we're about to go into with the call for projects, we don't currently have guidelines that would make it possible to project emissions reductions at the front end during the application process, nor do we have really clear measurements and verification on the back end after projects are constructed. And so if the concern from the committee was that projects that seem more likely to be able to be verified with carbon reduction also can't actually be verified, then is it appropriate to say the lighting or message boards aren't aligned with the objectives? Probably not currently, but the idea is generally that there probably will be better guidance on application for funding in this program to come up with a calculation method and some verification on the back end after projects are completed in the future. And so the concern is, are we setting some kind of precedent of it's easy to just swap out CRP funding for something else and skip past the idea that you should be using it for carbon reduction that can be either projected and or verified on the back end. And the committee members were a little bit concerned that this might be setting precedent of it's okay, just take the money, put it somewhere else and skip by the intention of what the funding was for. And so, the first year, it doesn't seem like this is a huge problem for several reasons. We decided that the pending application in this upcoming call for projects won't have a required calculation or projection of emissions reductions, mostly because there's not a city climate action plan, a regional climate action plan, a state climate action plan, nor any kind of verified way to do these calculations yet, but that probably will happen in the future. So at this time, it's probably okay. It is within the eligibility of either the programs. But just kind of discussion about caution toward in the future, we don't want this program funding to kind of just get kicked into a big pool that can be used toward anything without any attempt to follow the guidance of what the program funding is supposed to be for. And so, that's kind of where we were at during the committee discussion was this seems okay for now. It helps to expend the CRP funding with projects like we talked about that are within eligibility of either of these two programs. But in the future, I think we wanted to be clear that it's not an expectation that this funding is just going to get pushed into kind of whatever you want, continually, but that there should be an understanding of increased expectation for calculations on carbon reduction and or verification on the back end of projects once we have some that have made it through the program and are constructed and can now be measured to find out what was the impact they had. And I don't know if other committee members had any additional thoughts. I think, are you the only other one who was there? Or were you there also? Yeah. Does that sound like anything additional?
No, I think you summed it up well.
Okay.
I think two things too, when NDOT made CMAQ available to communities to apply for, part of the argument for that and MAPA and our members were a part of that was that those funds have a highest and best use. The state has flexibility to flex them, but there should be an opportunity to access those for things like orbit, things like, the signal system master plan, things like the ozone air quality work that MAPA has done. And I think this is kind of a similar piece. This was very consistent with the feedback that we gave the state on their statewide approach. I think the other more technical piece too is that in past MOUs, where MAPA has made our apportionment available for NDOT projects, whether that was for the Highway 70 or 3475 bridge or other things, we've always identified the projects that the apportionment is being used to, and the current draft that we have of the MOU doesn't have. So I think at a basic level, it's kind of two steps. I think there's one, we wanted to know the projects. When those projects were identified, there was some question about, really that highest and best use of the funds. I do think though, there's this practical issue of the funds will lapse if we don't make a decision. So I think that's good context for future years and iterations. I do think though that there is some urgency with which we need to address this just because the program was new and guidance didn't come for 24 months.
And to that point, I think the other idea was that there is additional funding for the CRP and TAPC in the out years right now. A pretty significant amount, I think it's $6 and $7 million by 2030. Is that the estimates that we've got? I mean, several $1 million that are available that need to be programmed.
Yep.
And if we don't have that is basically just encouragement to identify projects that are clearly carbon reduction program aligned and submit them for the funding so that we can get the funding used in the way that it was intended. And we don't find ourselves in this position of a couple years into the future. This would cover us for 2 more years, something like that, and avoid the risk that anything would lapse for about the next 2 years. But in the next 2 years, let's find some more projects that we can submit that are more clearly aligned with the objective of the program, even if it isn't extremely measurable on the, or, you know, able to be projected on the front end or measurable on the back end. But let's encourage communities to have some effort into identifying projects that are definitely eligible. Because again, you know, this funding just kind of sloshing around is not the desired outcome. So, you know, identifying things that are definitely carbon reduction program eligible is the encouragement from the committee so that we have sufficient applications during this call for project and in the future. Anybody have any thoughts? Anybody have any projects that they're ready to submit in between October and January?
Well, we've got, we're sending 2 projects to letting this fall. I mean, one of them, we already did a swap with CRP, but the other one, I mean, it's still funded with CMAQ, I think. So, I mean, we could use it if that's desired. And we would just apply that CMAQ funding to a later phase. So I'll throw that out.
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, we can talk to the DOT about that. Dude,
That's a good point.
yeah, I'll make a note about that.
And part of it might be, can we do all the program agreement swap and FEMA's work before that letting? That might be a challenge, but right.
Right, yeah. And if have any earlier phases been already funded with CMAQ?
Yeah.
That NDOT often doesn't like mixing, so that might be, they can, but
Yeah,
they might.
and when we have mixed, I mean, they have done that. There's been multiple funding sources on
Yeah.
the same project.
Yeah. It's, I've always just gotten pushback on, they usually want it to be clean.
Your issue gets to be is that it's the purpose
Yes.
related. You start crossing, then you get issues.
Sure, yeah,
So.
yeah.
I don't know if it'll work out, but
Yeah,
That's worth
I
asking.
can ask him about it, yeah.
And then quick, there was one final comment there that the state has CMAQ funding that is available, but has generally not been available in the metro area. Is that right?
Well, not as much recently. There certainly have been awards. But they, I mean, they don't have they don't usually do like an open call for projects.
Yeah.
Yes, it's at least it's not prepared in that way, but the region has been getting CMAQ funding particularly there has been a little bit for Metro and then for City of Omaha.
Yeah, and I think the general idea there was that we anticipate a higher likelihood of projects that are aligned with both CRP and CMAQ in the metro area. So as we talk with NDOT moving forward, there's a lot of good stuff that should be aligned here. We would appreciate NDOT helping to facilitate that funding being available in the metro area for projects that are clearly within the scope, rather than getting to this category of like, well, we think it's technically available, but it's not possible to actually measure it, so we'll let it go. But Metro's work is frequently clearly within the scope of carbon reduction and some of the other stuff like that. So anyway, that was the discussion, just trying to make sure that we were doing our best to get the funding allocated to the closest alignment with the intention of the program.
From CMAQ, that it's not that it's not available, they've used it on interstate things on those lines and used all of it up, but unless I'm correct.
I mean, I guess it's a year to year. It depends on what they allocate it to. And in years where they don't really have another use for it, then they'll usually reach out to.
Yeah, they flex it to SDG.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things the committee was also concerned about is, you know, are we flexing funding that had an intended purpose to a broader, just it's open to anything? Let's be careful about that because this can fund things that are difficult that need funding and won't happen without it. So let's make sure that we get those projects submitted so that they can take advantage of these programs. Well, thanks very much for hearing the discussion that came from the committee. And again, there's several $1 million that are expected to be available by the end of the upcoming tip.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and I'll have a full presentation on that next month. We'll be asking for a recommendation on opening the call for projects. Intent is to open it at the end of October. It'll run through about the second week of January, but I'll have all the details on which funding sources and, you know, how much funding is available. And there'll be I've already scheduled a PROSCOM meeting for ahead of that, to get a PROSCOM recommendation that will come.
And quick, one final reminder, there were no projects that were submitted from the Iowa side into the program, is that right?
In CRP, yes, we have not had we haven't had an Iowa CRP application yet.
So then I think I heard Iowa people online. Yeah, if there are Iowa side projects that are eligible for CRP, anything anybody can do to support you in that, glad to help out.
Yeah, go ahead. More work from Matt's team. Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, we've been having some conversations with Iowa DOT because there's a risk on the Iowa side of funds lapsing, and, you know, that Iowa takes a very, you know, collaborative approach, I would say, to that. I mean, we've run along high balance on STVG, and they've kind of just continued to make that funding available to us. I would say, though, we probably need a strategy. So I would say this call for projects is important in both states. Just we'll work with the local partners to make sure that we find the projects that make sense.
Thanks very much.
Okay. That was item F. G for discussion is a Safe Streets for All update.
Yes.
Yeah.
For those who don't know me, I'm John Mart with HDR. We're one of the sub-consultants on the WSP team doing the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan and Public Engagement. There's another contractor who's helping Jim Warner and Napa with the overall Safe Streets for All. So we gave a pretty lengthy presentation to the Safety Committee just a week ago on Wednesday. So this is a 10-minute update that reflects some of that, but Jim and I have talked about getting that presentation available to TTAC members to be able to review. This is the third of 6 updates planned for the Safe Streets and Roads for All project before we look to go to a final plan in spring of 2025 to allow the communities and MAPA to get together on future openings for implementation projects. So you can see here that the title is Policy and Process Change, which I'm going to talk about what that means. There were 2 other topics that we had. They were more brief, so I'm just going to give like the very quick overview on those. One was an engagement update. We've had a very active engagement stance on this project. We've been out to, I think, 8 communities now for engagement booths. We're going to hit a couple more, and then we've also got another firm working on community-based organization engagement. So that'll be coming. Some focus groups are going to be coming here yet this fall. And then towards the latter end, and I should mention survey that's very active and would be great for you guys to share with you know, your constituencies that can give a lot of data behind the importance of the analysis of the safety side if we're able to let people drop pins for safety issues. So lot being provided up front. We'll have bigger public meetings to share what the plan says towards the end. So there's also a data team that's working on this project. The data team is doing some pretty incredible things. There's still a push before I think a rollout at maybe the next opportunity for TTAC or safety committee meeting. So I won't say much from there except that we've been actively working towards priority corridors that are going to make a huge impact in kind of where the plan recommends early projects. So all of that to get to the topic that I've been leading, which is policy and process change. This is one of 8 core elements that are part of a safety action plan as USDOT defines it. We need to focus on how we write safety into our policy documents and how all of us as engineers, planners, even our folks in enforcement and EMS, how those procedures and plans are written. Because if we don't explicitly talk about safety, then other things like efficiency or expediency, they might be the top priority in how that's carried out. So huge part of this is to go through all of the existing plans and standards and review where we have alignment with a safe system approach. Safe system approach is a proven way that we're going to save lives, reducing transportation fatalities and serious injuries. So this kind of didn't align quite as well as I was hoping. It was before, it was two column kind of text here, but generally speaking, this is a long list of different plan types that we went through, and we did kind of a desktop search for these on each city's website and worked with MAPPA for any that had been provided. The main thing to note here is that, again, some of these are like comp plans. Everyone has one, varying levels of recency. You have others like maybe master impact fees that are just a few communities have that. And then you have others that mobility plan versus a bicycle master plan, like that have a lot of similarity. But this list is, again, from some federal resources that suggest we look at each type, just note what's out there, and then do kind of an audit type assessment of what they say about safety. So our team has a larger matrix. We provided that to MAPPA on 50 different practices that can be taken at the MPO or community level that would increase safety from a kind of not practiced level all the way up to potentially an institutionalized state where safety is regular, consistent. It's written in your documentation what that looks like for that action, and easily transferable as we continue to bring in new future generation of engineers and planners. So we don't have anything that's that far along, and that takes a lot of investment. So you'd want to focus that institutionalization on the top actions. So we're still working through what our MAPPA's recommended top actions and moving things forward. But what this sort of assessment model does is it tells us we've got 42 practices that are already started and they're happening out of 50. So we've made progress. It's about making that progress more consistent and keeping track of ourselves over time. So that's why we built this little dashboard that can be updated over time with the colors. So what I'm asking of you is, as you are looking at these slides later, or hopefully even right now, if you could just put some tabs on your phone. We've got 2 QR codes. One of them is so that you can see the existing policy review document. And that's a view only kind of document where you can look through it and you can see what we call that as valuable safety community or safety practices in each community. And then also that matrix that I laid out, like we found City of Council Bluffs plan on this, this, and this. So that's just so you can see our work as it stands right now. That work is going to guide future recommendations. The right-hand side QR code is a survey for feedback on review of the memo. One of the things that would be really helpful there is we have a question on, did we miss anything? It's just a document that you guys are using, but you don't have it either publicly available or where it's available. It just was difficult for us to access in the moment. So like I said, these 2 QR codes, you have to view the one on the left before you can answer the one on the right, but that would be tremendous help to the project team. So,
and most of you in the room will have received an email from me yesterday, just kind of a bit more detail, but yeah, we
same 2 links. Yeah.
Okay. So, and I'll say there's a lot going on, right? So there's a lot of communities that are in the midst of updating their comprehensive plans, some developing long-range transportation plans, some looking at potentially updating complete streets or traffic calming procedures. So all of those things fit very well underneath the process of Safe Streets for All. And there's a place for even application for planning funds in the next cycle. So that is part of our study, is providing that support either directly from MAPPA or through the consultant team. So if you think there's something you'd like to change and you'd like some funding to help make those changes, that's part of the conversation as well. Sorry, I'm still here.
No. Yeah. All right. So the rest of the conversation that we had was we have done some high-level research on other communities that are going through the CSAP process and trying to live into a safe system approach. As we did that and looked at those communities, we tried to filter things back through the core steps that we're already taking for the MAPPA CSAP. Those are in the blue box on the right. And then we were using each of those 8 areas as a spot where we would share at least one community, maybe 2, the practice with the safety committee, and then we would stop and we'd have a conversation. Like I said, we don't really have time for that in an update like this. But again, I want to give you guys a high level sense of where that conversation went. So we only put this question up at the end, but we used the tool Mentimeter to get feedback on what did the safety committee think was a prioritized list of these 8 core components. And I think that, you know, it's reasonable that everybody felt like at the top should be safety data, right? We're just constantly needing new data so that we can pick the best sites, and it's not gut instinct or, you know, based off of, you know, kind of strictly public perception alone. And so again, a lot of what MAPPA's award was set up with is setting aside a lot of space for data and tools in order to have that kind of best recommendation. Then the safety committee kind of had a next level that was on the importance of strategy and project selections, leadership commitments and goal setting, and then kind of engagement collaboration. So I've got a couple of those practices we shared with them that I'm going to share on strategy and project selection and leadership commitment and goal setting, because I think those are valuable to my understanding of our community. And then you get the ones that are a little bit lower down. But again, I feel like because we had the rate against one another, you know, these are just things that the community expects. You know, they don't feel like we need to put as much emphasis on it. But the planning structure was one that had a great conversation when we were there, and a good representative practice that could talk about where we're at versus where we're going. So I'll do a quick highlight on that too. So strategy and project selections, that's part of the scope for the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. WSP is going to lead that as we move forward with MAPPA. But one of the things that we found was that the city of Philadelphia has a program on you know, Vision Zero, and then kind of Safe Streets for All, where they have really made it a point of their planning approach that their project selections focus on these 6 principles on the left. And so, you know, they're using the crash data, they're picking areas that make sense for, you know, with countermeasures that are appropriate to reducing those crashes. But as they think about what are we going to work on first, they have a very principles focused approach. And so they're saying that because transit in our community has a very, very low rate for fatalities and serious injuries, let's make those areas that are in that supportive. We're focused on the competitive aspect of our city. And so if there are things that can help rebuild, you know, communities, like let's put a project near there. And so they give that sort of vote to those 6 elements, and it changes it from let's do the highest BCA project first, which oftentimes creates a patchwork where we're putting investment here, we're putting investment there. It doesn't build on itself. And so what we're finding is that a more principled approach to recommendations that tie both cost beneficial projects to principles of the planning approach, they lead to longer term improvement and growth of the program.
I'm gonna add one more thing, John. It's easy to say, well, how does Philadelphia even come close to comparing to what we're doing here? And that point was made really clearly in the safety committee meeting and some of the leadership committee meetings. And that's not what we're trying to get across here, is that, hey, Philadelphia did it, it's gonna work here. But that focusing in on things that make sense. So we grouped leadership committee meetings in organizations that are already kind of working together, the Western Douglas County Collaborative, and also the We Step plan. And so we found very similar things that we can work on that have a direct impact to safety that those groups can collectively work on. So it won't necessarily be these 6, it might not be 6, but tying into that safety plan into their ongoing efforts, just it really seemed to make a lot of sense.
But so just one, the strategy and the project selections, or is that going to be very data driven, or is that going to be kind of, how is that going to be done?
So that will be very data driven. The plan is to come to the safety committee and TTAC in December with that recommended process. So kind of those starting that discussion with selection criteria, and by to that point that the an overview of the high priority network, that network's composed of high injury network, which is our traditional, here's where those fatal and serious injury crashes have happened, a high risk network based upon roadway characteristics that we can measure and say these could be areas where fatal and serious injuries could be more likely to happen. And then that community input. And so there's gonna be a couple things that we'll look for input from you both, just kind of weighting of those different factors as they go into that priority network. And then going into project selection, those criteria that we do want to weight. So yeah, so data driven in that we want first and foremost to reduce fatal and serious injuries to 0 by 2040, but then the process by which we make sure that those I think it's not just project selection from a 1 to 100, but it's project selection from here's the most appropriate and probably easiest to apply funding source for those projects as well. So we do not want to just say we're gonna try to get millions of safe streets and roads for all implementation funds when we realize that there's a lot of things to work at. City of Omaha's first 2 projects, for example, are coming from an AARP grant, and that was because it was the right funding source for the right project, and it went in, and it's going to go to those 2 projects, and it's going to happen so quickly. So that will be other things that the team will come to us with, is what are those funding sources that are available, and some recommendations, even a limited number of assistance in drafting grants for funding sources for those identified projects.
And then kind of a second aspect that felt like it needed a lot of focus. And again, like Jim said, there's other scope that's been working on having leadership meetings to bring the leadership along as the project develops, not just force the results down anybody's throat at the end. But this is about where we've seen other communities, and they can be as nearby as Kansas City, or they could be over on the West Coast in San Jose, where mayoral and council voices have really influenced the amount of people who are paying attention to this issue, because it's not always an everyday conversation in the household, but it's a very serious conversation when we do have someone lost on the road. And so what we've seen is that, in Kansas City, it's helped coalesce certain neighborhoods that needed to be partners on some of their biggest opening projects. In San Jose, it's crossed many different areas, but just that pledge, I drive the speed limit. And because we've had all of these kind of speed reductions on the behavior side, we've got people taking ownership. They've actually seen a reduction, which, sadly, with a lot of the other factors that have been happening with fatal and serious injury crashes trends since COVID, almost nobody was seeing reductions, even when they're doing these plans, just because we've had a lot of people who have not processed those changes in the road well. So this has been a pretty big improvement, and it came from how they did the plan, how they involved leadership. This is the last one, and again, we felt like this could take some time, and that was probably why it was voted down quite a bit. But there's 2 different communities. They had 2 different approaches to how they have a planning structure. So you don't just focus on one safety champion who tries to drive the plan into the ground against opposition. You build a coalition. And so MAPPA's intended coalition, is there's a level that is the MAPPA executive, committee and with staff pulling that together. There's PTAC, and there is the safety committee, and safety committee broadens who we involve. That resembles Minneapolis's approach. Now, this is a city. So you can note here that some of the departments are named different, but still, you've got internal type staff committee, and then another committee level that's a lot more open. This was, one that we asked people to vote on, and there was some folks who preferred this committee approach the long way, but about twice as many were interested in this other approach. Again, I just happened to pull 2 that had Philadelphia, but we reviewed many communities. The thing that we were drawing out of this Philadelphia committee setup is that there were 5 or 6 task forces. They were topical. They were a lot more focused to people who wanted to work with data across a lot of parts of what we do, including public health and other nonprofits getting involved with that. How we focus on safe speeds. And so we had a lot of folks that's a passion of them is how they do design and getting speeds down, how we have, safer users. And so we had a lot of focus from some of those nonprofits that are really vocal and forceful, like, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So we've got all that. And that topical aspect helps to spread out the workload. So again, but there's about twice as many people voting. We're interested in that model in the long run. We'll look at that as part of the process, but we have to also be pragmatic about the fact that it can take considerably more staff effort, in order to build out committees like that where they're more voluminous. And with that, I'll just say that we'll have many more presentations, including one that's going to talk about recommended policies when we get there, which would be later this year. But did anybody have any other questions for the progress on the safety action plan? Okay, try into that.
Item H is the Metro Transit delay.
I'll switch over. Okay. Bill? Not. See if you can use the. All right. All right.
Morning, everyone. My name is Kelechi Chibukem. I'm community development planner at Metro Transit, originally from Lagos, Nigeria, West Africa. And I've been with Metro for roughly over a year now. And this presentation is just a summary of findings that we've found over the past couple months. We went on the street and did a timing study of 24th Street in Omaha, which is one of the very popular routes that we have. And we had submitted a report to MAPPR a few months ago. So this is just a basic summary of the findings that we got. So I'm going to start with why we had to do this analysis. One of the primary reasons we did this was because the 24th Street has very high volume of ridership. I mean, amongst the routes that we have, this one, comes in at right about 1 or 2, ranks about 1 or 2 in terms of volume of ridership. And also, there's lots of businesses along the route. North part of the route has tons of businesses. The south part of the route has tons of businesses. So that makes it very busy. Also, to add on top of that, it connects multiple colleges. There's the Creighton University, just right on the center there, and also the Metro Community College right up south. So it makes it very busy, and there's lots of pedestrian traffic. So we decided to, dig further to, study the delay character of the routes, because with the high volume of pedestrians, there's always opportunity for delay. So this study was to come up with kind of like a plan or recommendations to help cope the delays that we experience on the route. So the process was basically a 3-month process. The planning department is a team of 5. So we went out in pairs, basically, from the month of May to about June, which was a couple months back. And we focused on capturing trips in peak and off-peak times. So basically early mornings and late afternoons, like right during rush hour, we tried to capture trips during the time. And we captured 54 trips. So just to give you a time equivalent of what 54 trips typically looks basically 33 hours. So basically we sat 33 hours on the bus, just studying the behavior of the trip. So this is good data. Just go next. So this shows the geographical boundary of the route. This is the existing condition of what the route looks like. The red highlight on the map shows the connection from the North Omaha Transit Center to Metro Community College down at the south. So we basically would start the trip at the North Omaha Transit Center and travel south down to MCC, capturing timing behaviors and capturing passenger behaviors as well. So the corridor is roughly about 6 miles. Going southbound from the North Omaha Transit Center, we have about 53 bus stops. And going northbound from the Metro Community College Transit Center, we have about 56 stops. And that's a lot of stops. And roughly about 2 blocks apart, just to give you a good idea of what we're talking about. But I forgot to mention time point. So in between the 2 starting locations, we have about 7 time points. And a time point is basically a bus stop that a bus has to arrive to determine if it's on time or off time. So basically a time point determines the scheduling of a bus. So in between NOTC, as we see here, and MCC, we have about 7 time points. So if a bus arrives at this bus stop at a certain time, we say it's late. If it arrives at a certain time, we say it's early. But in between those time points, we have multiple bus stops. And the time points help us measure on-time performance. And this is just a background information just to draw people into the presentation. Now, this is the gist of the presentation here, delays. So see the blue highlight and the bar chart. I want you to soak that in. The average travel time for a trip is 36 minutes. Let's average it to about 36 minutes. So 62% of that time, the bus is actually in motion, moving, being active. The other 40%, it's stopped for, multiple reasons. Now think about it. I'm sure some of us drove to this place today. Now think about it. You're driving here and then you're stopped on the road for about 4 minutes of your time. Let's assume it takes 10 minutes to get here from your point of origin. You stopped for 4 minutes. Now that's a lot of time just sitting on traffic doing nothing. Now that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that our riders are basically stopped in traffic for about 40% of their time. That's not ideal for anybody, So, riders might get frustrated, stop taking the bus, go get a car, and there's more cars on the streets. More cars create congestion and create more opportunity for crashes. So that's the problem we found. We found out that about 15 minutes of the entire trip, the bus is stopped, not doing anything. And that's the problem that we're here to figure out a possible solution for through collaborative effort. And I'll just dive deeper into the delays that we found. So passenger delays constituted a bulk of the delays that we found. We found that passengers on wheelchairs take about 2 minutes to board the bus. Passengers riding a bicycle take about 32 seconds to board the bus, and a regular passenger who pays with fares, cash, coins, usually take about 18 minutes to board the bus and make a payment. We also have a technology called the UMO. We have an app and also a card that you can use to make payment on the bus. And we realized that passengers using that technology spend about 12 seconds to board the bus and pay. And we have a K-12 program, which is a program dedicated for high school students where they ride free, and they take about 5 seconds to board the bus. And the other 5 seconds, it's just the amount of time it takes for every passenger or most passengers to highlight from the bus. So just potential solutions that we're looking into to curb some of the delay issues we found with the passenger delays is a possible solution is installing raised platforms along the corridor. And we're currently doing this, or we already do this with a corridor called Dodge, where we have raised platforms for the buses, and that actually saves time for passengers using a wheelchair device. Also, there's an improved technology that if adopted, we can save about 25 seconds, and the technology basically helps wheelchair passengers align themselves into the bus without the help of a driver. So that independent securement saves approximately about 25 seconds. And that's something that we're, doing more research to, figure out if it's definitely necessary, but we're looking into that solution. And also to reduce the time spent loading the bike on the bus. Currently, the buses on the 24 route have the technology on the far right, so that's the right. And if we migrate to an onboard bike storage system, there's a potential to save time using that. But we also currently have this technology currently existing on the Dodge corridor as well. And we could also migrate to paying off board, where passengers make payments before boarding the bus, and that would save huge amount of time, roughly about 13 seconds per rider. That's what we're going to save if we're able to migrate to off-board payments. So this is the external delays that we discovered that arose from external conditions, and this one is delays that occurred from traffic signals. Along the corridor, we had multiple bus stops with, traffic light signals. I was mostly frustrated with the one on 24th and Lake, because anytime we got 24th and Lake, it was always red. Just for no reason, I don't know why, but every time we go to 24th and Lake, it was mostly red. And that's something that can be potentially solved if we're to adopt some sort of active signal priority for most of the bus stops along the corridor. And now going back to sitting in your car, staying idle for about 4 minutes, if we're able to migrate to active signal priority, we can actually save about roughly 20 to 30 seconds of that time. So we're literally saving about 30 seconds out of 4 minutes with this technology. And it works in a lot of other cities. And we see this as one of the top makers of delays along the corridor. And it also helps traffic flow seamlessly too, because there's less need for the bus to want to wait, and there's less need for crashes as well, and there's improved safety too with this technology. We also looked at stop signs along the corridor. There are multiple bus stops with stop signs, and we saw that the stop signs were creating delays of about 8 seconds per sign. So for every time the bus is stopped because of a stop sign, we're losing about 8 seconds. Another good one is the alignment delay. For most of us who aren't familiar with the route, up south there where the red highlight is coming down, that's 24th Street going south. So for the bus to connect to the north part of to the south part of the route, it has to make left turns. Basically, it has to make 2 left turns. So it makes left turns to go on 24th and Dodge, and then makes a right turn, a left turn to go on 25th and Dodge. So that portion of the trip, which is highlighted in blue, makes about 20 seconds just to make just to detour and get on the route. So that takes about 20 seconds. And a possible solution for that is to look into addressing the one-way street that's currently on 25th and Dodge down to 24th and Dodge down to 24th and Leavenworth. So just to give a more graphical explanation, so this is a one-way street coming down And this is also a one-way street going up. So if we're able to look into, fixing those one-way streets and creating a passage for the bus straight down south, that would actually save us 20 seconds of time. And that's literally 20 seconds of time. If you're stuck in your car for about 4 minutes, you're getting 20 seconds back. Also, congestion was a big one. We noticed that there were congestion along parts of the corridor, along various hotspots, 24th and F, 24th and Venton, 24th and M to P. Those took about 17 seconds. So we lost about 17 seconds due to congestion. And we also looked at the angled parking right around the south part of the corridor. And during peak hours, the angled parking are a little bit overwhelming because, drivers are trying to, get passengers to their locations, and there are a lot of businesses there, and they use the parking stalls, and people want to leave the parking store and move out. So in peak hour times, it's a little bit complicated and actually adds a lot of congestion to the corridor. We also looked into reentry delays. We saw this in multiple locations, 24th and F. And the reentry is basically a bus trying to get back on its lane. We can see a bus traveling in this direction, travels and then goes to pick up a passenger or drop off a passenger at the red box there. And then it has to merge into traffic. We realized that the amount of time it takes for a bus to merge into traffic takes about 12 seconds, which is a huge chunk of time. And I personally had a conversation with the driver who was literally frustrated on a weekend that it takes a huge amount of time to merge into traffic because, general cars don't make way for the buses. So the drivers have to wait and finesse for, a huge chunk of time to get into traffic. And we figured a possible solution for that is to design an inline bus stop. And this is one from Metro County in Seattle, where they have an inline stop design with also a bike lane along the side. So the bus here doesn't have to wait for cars. It's basically in line with traffic. And this creates a seamless connection for everyone in traffic. It creates a seamless connection for the pedestrian, for the cyclist, for the bus, and even for cars, and minimizes crashes to the least. So that's a very potential solution for that problem. This is the last slide, I think, and this is just general recommendations that we came up with. So basically, we're considering looking into upgraded services for riders. We're definitely going to look more into the orbit design guidelines and look if there are things that we can, work with, with community members, with stakeholders to figure out the sort of upgraded services we can add to the corridor. Also, bus lanes came up as a potential strategy for time savings. They don't also save time, they also make traffic clean and make traffic more safe. Also, bus line consolidation, because of how close the bus stops are. We're looking into, increasing the distance between each bus stop so that the bus doesn't have to stop that frequently, and that will save much time too. Okay, this is the end of the slide. I guess for me to just clarify, Metro is continuing to look into the 24th Street corridor. There are multiple future projects that we would have to, dig into further to study other conditions of the corridor. But is there any further questions that I have? That you have for me?
very impressed with how much you can cut down and doing the right things.
Mhm.
The ones that in Minneapolis, they have those dedicated areas as
Yes.
well. But on that portion there, it seems like we're crossing bikes with buses. And that's a little scary.
Okay.
On the last one before that, I think. you
this
had
one?
separated. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand why it's a little scary. Personally, I enjoy riding the bikes. I was in New York couple weeks back, and they had very impressive bike lanes, and it was also connected with bus lanes as well, and it was safe for me for the most part, especially as a tourist, you know. But I can understand people who have different, opinions as to what safety is. But yeah, that's, like I said, that's something that we're looking further into. It's not set into stone, but definitely something we're looking into because it's working for other cities of the same size as ours too.
It's a good step forward.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think one thing, Denny, too, to think about when the alternative, so if you have the bike lane, running along like a parking lane, then the bus has to cross to get to the curb to maintain ADA accessibility. This kind of just basically keeps the bus going in one place and the bike going in one place, and you don't have that crossing movement. So you even think about like the Hardy Street bikeway, there were a number of areas during that pilot project where the bus would have to pull up to the curb and then come back across. And so there was a lot of things where this has been one of the solutions, but it's obvious you still have to maintain ADA. And so there's a lot of things you have to look at with the slope and the curbs. And it's a bigger investment, but on corridors like 24th Street that have a lot of traffic, it's kind of the places that it might make sense. There's one question I have for you. You all have a lot of federal funding to look at 24th Street, potential going to like an orbit type service. How does this work fit into that?
Of course, so this work is just, I'd say, foundational work for now. We're definitely looking into leveraging some federal funds in the future to, dive deeper into the character of the corridor to actually figure out if we necessarily need orbit type upgrade. But this is just a foundational information to, keep consultants involved and also keep community members informed about the current situation of the corridor. And our drivers also need this information because they do most of the work. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add, we did a similar exercise on Dodge Street during the process of preparing for orbit. And that information was really critical as we had to make some decisions about what infrastructure we could afford or really what those key pinch points were that we would get our biggest results from. So we wanted on the front end of this study to have all that data available to our consultant team so that we can really hone in on like what benefits will actually get us the furthest. And so we can really use data to drive our study as it comes.
Can I ask a question? I'll be the Debbie Downer as always. I guess, when you look at some of these solutions that you come up with and how it affects ridership, how it affects bicyclists, pedestrians, and then commuters. For instance, the Dodge Street corridor, has there been a comparison of what the increased ridership is compared to the increased congestion that these alternatives have had to the daily drivers?
And I'd be interested to see if the city's seen any like documented negative impacts on traffic based on orbit being there. But I can say ridership is way up. We're gonna hit 2 million rides by this November, which is 4 years since it opened. So ridership has grown.
Before?
Probably we were averaging 8,000 a week on Route 2, and now we're at close to 12,000 a week. But yeah, I will add, this type of feature, it's really important to look at with 24th Street. It's obviously very different than Dodge. So any type of solutions that we come up with are going to have to be adapted to the corridor itself. And because 24th has bike lanes and is planned to have bike lanes pretty much this entire stretch, we need to think really carefully, to Mike's point, about how transit and bike traffic intermingle. Because we don't want to create more conflicts that already exist.
When you get to you especially in the business corridors, I mean, building one of these at every stop or even every other stop would take up a significant portion of, I would say, parking in those areas. That would be a major issue down there. I mean, parking's already difficult down there as it is for most of the time period. And correct me if I'm wrong, they've actually lost parking due to improvements in the area. So cutting into it more just doesn't go well.
That's why they make those big concrete things where you can park cars on.
Yeah, that's actually part of it too.
Yeah.
It's a really good.
About 50 million a pop.
That is part of the solution on the south part of the 24th and N project is the Plaza de la Raza at 24th and N, where they've got the parking lot that gets activated during Cinco de Mayo and those other things. It's gonna become a park, and a parking garage is kind of in planning to anchor that neighborhood as well. So that's a big portion of, as Orbit's considering where it's gonna go, if they do, or where, if it's Orbit or if it's just enhanced bus service, getting to that parking garage is gonna be important too. But that's an exact point, I think, that they're gonna have to work through. There's a lot of things happening on this corridor from north to south, and there's different pieces of it, so.
Who's paying for that?
I believe the city of Omaha is contributing.
And the state.
And the state.
I think these are all good ideas, but I think all of them, it's not a one size fits all approach. All of them could be implemented, in certain places along the corridor, but you're probably not gonna implement any one idea everywhere along the corridor. Because there's obvious trade-offs with all these things. So, as far as TSP goes, where the city's more than like to do TSP. Some of the signals you mentioned have been upgraded and are TSP capable, other ones haven't been yet. 24th and Lake you mentioned is an interesting intersection. We don't have a lot of congestion in North Omaha, but that intersection does get it's very constrained. They're all single lane approaches and, we get, if you're going northbound or eastbound, it's not so bad. If you're going southbound or westbound, it's not so good. So, but it's kind of a pavement limitation there. So, but with the streetscape improvement, maybe there's an opportunity to do something different there.
How much effort would be involved in setting up, like I guess kind of getting TSP look around? Like, I don't know, would that need to be like a?
I mean, the buses need to be outfitted with the device. So you'd have to use those same buses on that route, obviously. So, that's on the signal side, it's really just a
Program.
receiver up on the master arm and it's relatively inexpensive, all things considered, but.
Well, it could be a carbon reduction program project. Just throwing that out.
So, other things like you mentioned the stops in South Omaha at 24th and NO. Those other ones, right through the business district of South Omaha. I mean, there's an obvious trade-off there. Yes, you could probably go to a two-way stop, but pedestrians probably wouldn't like it. Makes it more difficult or time consuming to cross there. 24th and Vinton is another interesting one. We did that road diet project through there and now it's essentially over capacity during certain times of day. So there's not a lot that can be done. There's just additional delay. So, but it's just a trade-off. I think the road diet was a good project, but it's just one of the negative trade-offs, I guess, is that there's more delay now than there was before. And there's a couple intersections. But Vinton is one of those, probably has seen the most increase in delay, but.
And I think too, just even from Metro Transit, the current bus route operates on 24th Street. I think that's one area in the business district to the south where, in the planning that's been done, that those stop signs moving to a corridor that's parallel, that doesn't have those stop signs, or looking at those improvements off that central business district corridor. That's where your Orbit design principles and all the guys that go into what that is and You've set those standards through Metro Next, and I think those are really interesting, good, but it's kind of decision making that just avoiding places where you can't. I need some data to back it up. It's really interesting.
Yeah, we know that'll be a pretty important decision in the process. A lot of our drivers wish we would just go up 25th, which is kind of like the back side of that district. And we have to weigh all the time, like, do we get people right to where they're trying to go and be in the heart of the activity? Or do we go somewhere where we can move through faster, but it's not really where anyone's trying to get to?
You have alignment delay then too.
Yeah. But yeah, so the goal really of this was just to get a solid understanding of the problems. And then that kind of helps direct us to what we need.
Are you gonna look at other corridors? Do this on other corridors?
It's a pretty substantial effort.
Yeah.
So we only did it on 24th because we have the federal funds to study it forward.
Are you starting on that 24th Street project now then, or when's that gonna start?
The RFP is in development.
Okay.
So once it's to a point that we're ready to post it, it'll be up.
So from your early graph, the kind of pie chart of timing, did this analysis look similar to the analysis you did in the past? Back, there you go. Is that what the analysis showed the last time you did some study like this? Or is this substantially different than?
I don't remember exactly what the Dodge Street one looked like, but I would say it was a similar baseline. And it's interesting to note that one of our biggest problems is our own riders. And it's like, you're a victim of your own success. You have stops every 2 blocks. That really slows you down. And even if you're able to cut half of those out, that saves you 8% of your delay. Yeah, it's all a balance of giving people what they want, which is, I want to walk right out my door and be at the stop. But then once I'm on the bus, I don't want it to stop again. So,
It's the same story with signal preemption. I want to turn right out of my neighborhood and then I don't want to stop again. Pick one.
so yeah, it's passenger delay is a tough one to solve, but
Kind of frequency do you run? Frequency of buses.
yeah, so right now it's every 15 minutes. So it's similar to what we operated on Dodge. We're upgrading to every 10.
You guys ever done any sensitivity analysis to weigh frequency versus ridership? I mean, if you go from 15 minutes is already pretty aggressive, but lighter routes are 1 hour or 30 minutes. If you go to 15 minutes, what does that actually do to your ridership? I'd just be curious because
Yeah.
you would think it would attract more riders, but
It definitely does.
is it, again, it's trade-off.
So this was 30 minutes.
Route 24.
Yeah.
It's been every 15 since 2015.
Yeah, but before that it was 30. And when you went to 15, your ridership went way up, right?
Yeah, yeah, so this corridor itself is a really interesting story. Because when I started at Metro, we used to have 3 separate routes that served 24th Street. There was one that went from North Omaha to downtown, another one that covered kind of the middle section and then went to the VA. And then there was a third South 24th Street route that also connected through downtown. So like you couldn't ride end to end at all. And so we saw that people were transferring to make this movement possible. We instituted a straight alignment route and ridership jumped quite a bit. And it's really only continued to grow since then.
So it's on 24th Street all the way up to the crossing and then Ames and then Transit Center. Yeah. I wasn't very familiar with the route here, but a lot of the active transportation planning has been around getting to the North Omaha Transit Center. So I just couldn't remember if this route was directly connected to that location or not. If it's, if I didn't. Oh, good, because we built a bunch of trails up there.
Discussion on this particular item? Thank you very much. Okay. It is 11:30. So these last 2 items are time permitting. We want to run through member agency updates. if we do, if there's a agency that wants to run through updates, now would be the time. Start. Metro, do you have anything you'd like to add or other than? Thanks. You okay?
We got the North Freeway, this Sunday evening. They're painting the bridges at Hamilton and Parker. It finished East Third. So Sunday evening, they're gonna move the operation to the middle third. But to do that, we're gonna have to close that 480 from out of downtown, westbound to northbound. We're gonna close that. Because we don't have enough room to merge 480 northbound direct and 480 westbound and northbound. There's not enough room in there.
How long is that gonna be closed?
So just that evening. But they get everything moved to the center. That's the only thing I really have.
Okay.
I noticed an RFP went out for design services on 480. Are they doing something on that? Where, do you know where we're at? No. It's for the DOT, I mean, 480, I'm on, so that's why. If it's tied to the MTIS reconstruction specifically, I do know that those projects got initiated to start the NEPA E for them. It might be related to that, and that's for the, we had a project programmed to reconstruct the bridges of Woolworth, St. Mary's, and Leavenworth. And we ended up scrapping that project, realizing the logistics of tying that to the reconstruction of 480 in that corridor and the expansion. So we reprogrammed the project as a standalone reconstruction effort from the I-80 interchange essentially up to the concrete transition. I think it's just south of Hardy and Farnham. So that's probably what that is. I don't think there's anything else on the 480 corridor that would warrant that.
Well, there's not much there. But it carries a lot of traffic, it's not that long, so.
Yeah.
I'll wait till the end.
A couple quick ones from the county. We are pouring 168th and State today, the State Street jump. That project is behind schedule, but they're still telling us it's gonna be open this fall, and we plan to fully open 222nd in Q by next Friday.
Are you making a bigger jump?
We're making a grade separated jump, so you can jump over the opposing jets without delay mitigation tactic. We're gonna get buses preemption. Be good. Good.
Nothing real on our end, although we're doing some repairs on 84th Street. Got that lady doing some work on 84th Street, otherwise all works in the neighborhoods.
After we opened the Flat River Bridge Trail, apparently it's popular with users who are capable of moving a 4,000-pound concrete barrier. I don't know who did that, but we left that out there until we got the bollard in. So kudos to whoever was strong enough to move that to take your ATV across the bridge. We will be installing permanent bollards to discourage that. I didn't know that someone was so aggressive about that, but I'm glad they're enjoying the bridge. But yeah. Dang those guys. So anyway.
If you don't have that, they probably have the capability to cut those bollards down and.
I mean, we're trying to figure out a strategy to say, hey man, no motorized vehicles, come on.
I was gonna say, be careful, be glad they're not driving a tractor.
I don't know what's going on there. Nobody has seen it as far as I can tell, but somebody moved, we left those search barriers out there and somebody moved one on both ends. So who or why or what they were doing, but we're gonna try some new things, so I'll report back after we get those installed.
Our Stephen Road project, which is the last of the East Beltway, should open next week to traffic. Brings a conclusion to that program. I'll just say I'm happy to share that we turned on our 500th signal last week at 32nd and at Creighton. So it's kind of the ceremonial halfway point. So I've been funding a lot of signal system projects, but we're halfway done. And, for probably 75% done with design, so a few more years to go, but we're halfway there.
Noticed a couple new dark ones out west that look like they're coming out. Stop signs with flags on them, so keep up the good work.
Excellent.
Parting thought, MAPPA's annual dinner will be Wednesday, October 9th. I don't remember if that's something that I did, but I'll pass out a link to register if you'd like to. Oh, yeah, from that.
I do have one.
Oh, actually, that's
Yes.
true.
This will be my last T-TAC. I have received a job offer to work in the Freight and Rail Division of the Minnesota Department of Transportation. So this will cut my lifelong streak of being a resident in the great state of Iowa, but probably be last to speak to a lot of you except for IODOT, which they will be hearing a lot more from me not too long in the future.
Good luck.
Good, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Virtual round of applause for Michael.
We're collecting projects from each of you. I think this is 1 in 6 year plan time, so please, if you don't see an email from either Court, Michael or me, please just have your staff send it on. The first stage really is getting those projects that make changes that would affect the model into the model. So we might ask if you have, plans that show lane infrastructure and any information that supports the project more than just the 1 in 6 listing, and it gives that context. We'd be looking for that as well. We're going to do those inputs. We had showcased a tool that we wanted to use. It's still not quite ready, so we're going to do those inputs for the model this year, but definitely looking forward to providing a place. And I guess I'll say, we're working with our partners. I think we all want to be able to share information and put it in one place once. We're not going to do that immediately, but hopefully that's what this tool will provide you for future projects. So look for an email from the 3 of us, and if somebody has it right at hand, we would appreciate just being sent our way for the 1 in 6 year projects and any other concepts that you have for the out years out to 2015. Thank you.
Is there anything else? Any additional business? Anybody would like to cover? Okay, with that, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Make a motion. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Stay as long as you're with me.